Okay, so over the last year, we've heard a lot from our former ally and many other citizens. Some of them still think we should be their 51st state. Some of them really don't care what's going on. And some of them will say whatever they can to try to convince us and lure us to come back to their country. Then again, there are also US citizens that say, what do you want us to do about it? But there are also those who are apologizing to Canada and the rest of the world. But in this video, I'm going to show one article. It was a guest column in the Windsor Star from a US citizen, and it's titled, Canadians Matter. Americans will regret this time in history. Now, I appreciate the sentiment and the thought from this guest column post. But will US citizens regret this time in history? That I'm not too sure about. And I'm going to talk about that in this video. I also want to talk about an article that somebody posted in my subreddit. It's titled, BC travel across the US borders declines for 13th straight month. I don't know about you, but this makes me so happy to read. So we'll talk about this as well, and I'll give you the updated numbers. The backdrop you're looking at today comes from Lorelei, and she took this photo in Regina, Saskatchewan. I remember a while ago that somebody was complaining that I never posted up photos of Saskatchewan, basically saying something like, oh, you know Saskatchewan's part of Canada too, right? I mean, come on, I only post up what I get. So after saying that in one of my previous videos, Lorelei said, hold my beer, and started sending me a whole ton of Saskatchewan photos. So thank you, Lorelei, for becoming the trusted source for Saskatchewan photos. Okay, I want to get to the guest post in the Windsor Star from someone named Phoebe Wall-Howard, who's a US citizen. Now I'm going to read it out to everyone because I know some of you are just listening right now, and I get to practice my reading. Right away, Phoebe says, I'm just so sorry. Things seem to be getting worse. Every day, every week, every month. I wonder what my grandpa would say. I've been thinking about him a lot lately. We cherry-picked tomatoes from his garden in Detroit. We played cards, sat in the living room, and read and listened to Tigers baseball on the radio. One thing he loved about being a Detroiter was Windsor, its proximity and its people. They held a special place in his heart amid memories of hard of times. Robert Gunther Wall, a house painter, couldn't support his family during the Great Depression. Even rich people in the beautiful mansion stopped hiring. A neighbor knew someone who helped my grandpa get a job as a ticket taker at the Windsor Tunnel. In the mornings, Grandpa would slip on a uniform and fancy footwear to match. That tailored uniform filled my grandpa with pride. At the time, so many other people were consumed with fear and uncertainty. Instead of going to work with my great-grandfather at T.J. Wall & Sons paint shop in Detroit's Corktown, my grandpa went 2.6 miles to the Windsor Tunnel. It had just opened in November 1930 with the world's first international underwater vehicle tunnel. Grandpa didn't need to worry about feeding his wife and 3 kids because he had a stable job. He greeted Canadians going home. To him, Canadians represented a symbol of hope and better times. We forever have kept a place in our hearts for that time when our connection to Windsor provided safety and security. US citizens seem to have forgotten. Not only did Canada serve with our soldiers in wars, including World War I, World War II, Korea, and Afghanistan, but Canada was essential to the US during the 9/11 crisis. Friends and allies always. I don't mean to nitpick on things, but both World War I and World War II, you guys showed up late. Just saying. Anyways, back to our post. Our national tone has changed dramatically since President Orange Guy, re-elected in 2024, jokes about annexing Canada as the 51st state, new tariffs, demands Canada show gratitude, threats to disrupt the opening of the Gordie Howe Bridge. Last week, the New York Times reported that US may negotiate a North American trade deal without Canada. Not surprised that traffic into the US from Canada by car and plane plummeted in 2025. It shows no signs of improvement. There may not be a formal boycott, but Canadians just don't feel the love anymore. Greg Grimes, deputy mayor of Point Edwards, Ontario, told me. The connection between Detroit and Windsor goes beyond auto industry that has thrived with international collaboration. I know the USA is a superpower and Canadians have always been in your shadow, but at the same time, we are an independent sovereign country, Deputy Mayor Grimes told me. Politico reported this month in partnership with the UK polling firm Public First that Canadians increasingly view the US as a source of global volatility instead of a stabilizing ally. Canadians say the US no longer reflects their values, is more likely to provoke conflict than to prevent it. US citizens will look back to this forever and regret their time in history. I'm not sure about that. Or, in the words of the Egyptian-Canadian author, Omar El-Akkad, one day, everyone will have always been against this. This past week, we drove through the Windsor Tunnel to the Omagio Kildare House in Windsor for my husband's traditional birthday dinner of halibut fish and chips with Walkerville Honest Lager. We'll continue to show support for Canada. Because it matters, Canadians matter. Now the first question that comes to my mind when I read this. Has anyone been to this Omagio Kildare House for fish and chips? I know it's completely off topic, but I just figured out what I'm going to have for lunch tomorrow. Now, back to this article. I do appreciate the sentiment by Phoebe, and she did share a story that actually is meaningful. and I appreciate that she says Canadians matter. But my question is, how many of your fellow 340 million US citizens will actually say that Canada matters? Because quite a few of them probably don't even know where Canada is on a map. Now, don't get me wrong, I love this message from Phoebe, and I'm grateful that she said it. And I know there are millions of US citizens that feel the same way that Phoebe does about Canada, and many of you are watching this video right now. But what I'm about to say, I speak for myself on this one. I do appreciate all the US citizens that are supporting Canada. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a very small percentage of the 340 million US citizens. But with the lack of apathy around the United States about everything that's going on right now, unfortunately, it makes messages like these a little bit hollow for me. It is appreciated though, Phoebe, but I just wish more of your fellow citizens felt the same way. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with me on this. Now I want to move on to this next article. It's titled, BC Travel Across the US Border Declines for 13th Straight Month. It's time for me to use this meme again. But I'll be perfectly honest with everyone. I think last year when I started this channel, I was actually expecting the boycott to kind of fizzle down a little bit. And that really bothered me because I remember hearing the businesses saying that this is just a phase, and I didn't want them to be right. Well, to the US businesses who thought this was just going to be a phase and that we would be back, I hope you enjoy looking at your empty cash register. Kind of like this business owner last year who said the whole thing is just going to be a phase.
Brad Mosshart is also a longtime Kennebunk business owner. He runs F8 Photography Studio just down the road on Spring Street. He says he has lots of clients that are Canadian, and he's heard from plenty that they will continue to come.
It's just kind of a little bit, there's a hype out there, but I don't think it's going to really matter.
Well, unfortunately for this guy, it wasn't a phase. But fortunately, I was able to find this clip again. And I want to give our community member, Kay, a shout out for helping me find this clip again. I'll be bookmarking this for the future. So this clip will be sitting right beside those two clowns, plus the bow tie guy. Now getting back to the article, it states here, data from the Cascade Gateway Border Data Warehouse and Whatcom Council of Governments showed 100,709 BC-plated passenger vehicles crossing those 4 border points in February, down more than 16.6% from the 120,788 such vehicles that did in February 2025. That was the smallest year-over-year monthly decline in those crossings since the streak began in February 2025. Now moving forward, these percentages are going to be a lot lower, mainly because they're comparing 2025 to 2026. But as long as I'm still seeing a decline from 2025 to 2026, I'm happy because I know the boycott is still working. Now you can see here over the last year, or at least the last 6 months, it's been well over 30%, and I don't see this changing anytime soon. The article then says, the Canadian dollar so far this year has been higher than on corresponding dates in 2025. You know, I really hope the Canadian dollar continues to rise, because that'll give these US businesses and tourism officials one less excuse to blame it on. But I'm sure they'll just end up blaming it on something else. Okay, that's all I got for this video. If you found any value or agree with anything I said today, or you want to hear more from a Canadian perspective, without the US media bias, I know somebody called me out on that, so I'm going to correct it. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button below. That way you're informed of my future videos. Thanks everyone, I'll catch you in the next one.